Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Billi.
I'm Sam.
In case you missed it, the death penalty has returned as the most extreme punishment one can receive for a federal crime in the US. It was one of the many executive orders President Donald Trump made on his first day in office back in January. And now it could be used in one of the most high-profile murder cases in the country of the past decade. Today, we are here to explain the use of the death penalty in the US and why it might be used in the case of Luigi Mangione.
Billi, this was really one of the biggest stories in the world when everything happened in December. That was 4 months ago, which is just crazy to think about that. I mean, I remember not only the story and just the brazen vision that we could see of what happened on the street, and we're going to get into exactly what happened, but then the internet reaction after that as well. Before we do get into what's happened this week, particularly in relation to the death penalty, give me a brief overview of who Luigi Mangione is and what he's accused of doing.
Yeah, many of us will remember this case because of how viral it went on social media, particularly on TikTok. I think it just, had a life of its own on that platform. So Luigi Mangione, he is a 26-year-old man, and in December of last year, he was arrested over the killing of a health insurance CEO in New York. Now, the CCTV footage, which you were just talking about, Sam, of this shooting shows the CEO, whose name is Brian Thompson, walking to a conference in New York just before 7 a.m. one morning. And the shooter, who we now know is allegedly Mangione, comes up behind him in this eerily calm fashion. He really doesn't look stressed at all. It almost looks like it's straight out of a video game. And he shoots Brian Thompson from behind, and Thompson immediately drops to the ground, and he was announced dead at the scene. Now, this shooting prompted a nationwide manhunt, almost international if you take into account, all of the people on social media around the globe who were completely hooked to this case.
The amateur sleuthing.
Exactly.
It was a really interesting time to watch the internet kind of be a bit of a beast.
Yeah, and it went on for a couple of days. I think it was just under a week that, there were prosecutors or there were police all over the country trying to figure out who this person was. And then that ended when Mangione was spotted by an employee at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. And this employee thought that he looked like the photos that the police had distributed of the shooter, and Mangione was indeed then arrested by police. Now, they seemed pretty confident that he was the person they had been looking for, and there were lots of different signs that kind of led them to that belief. So, for example, he was carrying a gun that was consistent with the one used in the murder. And he also had a handwritten document on him which accused healthcare companies for putting profits above care. And we knew that whoever this person was that shot the healthcare CEO probably did have a really big issue with the way healthcare companies are run in the US. I remember the bullets of the gun had the words delay, deny, and oppose scratched on to the side of the bullets. And those are phrases that are often used to criticize the tactics used by insurers to avoid paying claims.
There was definitely this huge wave of discussions about the way that the US healthcare system operates, also about the wages that executives are on, the standing of these public companies. The shooter, in some ways, did get what they wanted in terms of a discussion to be happening about it. It really did change corporate America.
Yeah, it did. And so the fact that Luigi Mangione had this letter with him when police found him.
Somewhat of a manifesto.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the note the police said it illustrated ill will toward corporate America. So again, there were lots of different signs that led police to be quite confident that Luigi Mangione was the person they were looking for.
Sure.
Now, since he was arrested. He has been in prison in New York, and he has been in and out of court. I'm sure many of us have seen the photos of, he's in the orange jumpsuit appearing before court on several different occasions. And probably the biggest update since the Daily Aus covered this is the fact that he has pleaded not guilty.
So let's talk about that, though, because you've taken us through the evidence, you've taken us through the CCTV footage. It's hard to know how to talk about this properly because there's obviously a legal process going on, but there's a mountain of evidence that suggests that Mangione is the killer. But he's pleading not guilty. So does that mean he's saying he didn't do it, or that they have the wrong person? Like, what does that plea actually mean?
Yeah, I was so interested in this and I went on a huge deep dive because obviously in America, just like in Australia, you can be arrested for a crime, but there is a presumption of innocence.
Sure.
So you are considered innocent until you are otherwise proven guilty.
Which is his status right now.
Exactly. So Luigi Mangione has not been found guilty. There is all of this evidence, but he hasn't been found guilty. And I was really interested in, is he saying that they have the wrong person despite all of this mountain of evidence that we just briefly went through? And I couldn't really find too much except for his lawyers constantly saying that he's entitled to the presumption of innocence and he should be treated that way. And they have a huge issue at the moment with both the media, the public, and also how prosecutors are acting, saying that everyone is treating him as though he is guilty, but he hasn't gone through the court process yet. But in terms of whether they're saying they have the wrong person, I couldn't find anything where they said exactly that. It's possible that maybe Luigi Mangione just wants to go through the court process and wants his lawyers to talk about all of the reasons.
This is the thing, right?
Yeah,
it gives them a platform.
Exactly.
And we've seen that with other high-profile criminals over the years, particularly in America, and the way that their justice system can operate is even if he does have a guilty verdict handed down, I can almost guarantee he's going to appeal that. And this process could last, a decade. And it keeps giving somebody who's alleged of a crime or convicted of a crime a chance to actually have a platform to engage in fundraising, to engage in, talking about the things that they so firmly believe in that they might have or are convicted to have killed for it. It's a really interesting quirk to the system. And on one hand, I get it. Everyone is entitled to a fair trial and is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But he's facing some pretty serious charges, right?
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm the co-founder of the Daily Aus, and we started this company because we think news can be done differently. If you agree, you can hit subscribe. It's the best way to help us grow. Now, back to the video.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, though, that he has this platform at the moment, and by pleading not guilty, again, I'm not saying that he's definitely guilty, but by pleading not guilty, he is stretching out how long the media and the world will be paying attention to him and this case.
Can we just go back one step? So what exactly has he been charged with?
Yeah, so he's facing multiple charges at both a state and a federal level. So just like in Australia, there are criminal laws at both a state and federal level. And if you are alleged to commit a crime, you will be prosecuted at either a state level or a federal level or both.
Right.
And so in this case, Mangione is accused of breaking laws at both the state and federal level. He's actually accused of breaking laws in two states, in Pennsylvania, where police found him, and in New York, where he allegedly committed the murder, and then also at the federal level. So I'll go through the state charges first, and I'll just focus on the ones in New York because those are the main ones. And so in New York, he's accused of first-degree murder and also murder as an act of terrorism. I remember when that charge came out, that generated a lot of conversation, the fact that this is being considered an act of terrorism.
And just quickly, the difference between those charges from those discussions, I think you and I had on the pod a couple of months ago, is because prosecutors want to argue that there was this ideological driver behind the murder. So they've got both bases covered. Yes, this person was killed because they were killed, but also they were killed for this reason.
Exactly. So those are the two main charges in New York, but there are also several others there. And then on top of that, there are also the federal charges, which includes use of a firearm to commit murder, and then also interstate stalking resulting in death. And now it's those two charges that I just spoke about at the federal level that we're talking about today, because it's those ones that could result in the death penalty.
And so the reason you and I are talking about this on the podcast today is the introduction of the prosecution saying we want to pursue the death penalty. I didn't know that the death penalty was still widely used across America.
Yeah, well, I guess because in Australia it's not used at all. Do you know when it was last legal in Australia?
70s?
1985.
Okay. Well,
so what's that? Exactly 40 years. Yeah. So it's been a long time. But in the US, it hasn't. So I was interested to learn that the death penalty is actually still legal in 24, which is nearly half of the US states. But again, that's at a state level. And worth mentioning that in New York, it's not legal. So the death penalty can't be used against Luigi Mangione in the state charges that we were talking about. But at a federal level, it's only recently been made legal again.
Which I'm assuming has been a recent change with the change of administrations, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that it is such a political issue in the US. So in July 2021, just a few months after becoming president, Joe Biden ordered a pause on the death penalty at a federal level, essentially saying that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and humanely. Now, he introduced that after Donald Trump in the previous 4 years had obviously been president, and there had been a rise in the number of crimes that had resulted in the death penalty.
Right.
So Joe Biden pauses it, then Donald Trump is voted into the White House again, and on his first day, earlier in January this year, Donald Trump signs an executive order on his first day to restore the death penalty.
And so just quickly to kind of catch everybody up, this executive order, it's this power given to the president to pass a law that doesn't require the approval of Congress. And he did that. Why did he use this quite extraordinary power of the president to action that on day one?
Well, the reason that they gave in the actual executive order, they said capital punishment, which is another word used to describe the death penalty, is an essential tool for deterring and punishing those who would commit the most heinous crimes and acts of lethal violence against American citizens. So they're basically saying this is the ultimate deterrent to anyone thinking of committing any crime like this.
And to President Trump's credit, it was him delivering on a campaign promise. And he won the election across the board in the US, and he said he was going to be tough on crime in this way. But now this could be used against Luigi Mangione.
Yeah, so on Tuesday this week, the US Attorney General, who is the country's chief legal advisor, so basically like the top lawyer, recommended that the death penalty be used in the case of Luigi Mangione. So the Attorney General said the murder was, quote, a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination of an innocent man and father of 2 young children. She said this murder was an act of political violence, and she also added that, quote, because the murder took place in public with bystanders nearby, it could have posed a grave risk of death to additional persons.
Right, and obviously this is still in the context of the trial needing to take place. It's not the Attorney General saying this is going to be the result. It's them saying that this is what the prosecution is going to pursue. So what's happening now then?
So Mangione is due to next appear in a federal court in New York on April 18th, so that's just over 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
Now, that is a hearing. It's not the actual start to the trial, but it is a step closer to the trial taking place. I don't know when exactly that trial starts. We don't have that date yet.
There are a lot of details they're going to need to figure out. One of the big contentions they're going to have to decide on is, can you find a jury of people who haven't particularly been tainted in their view of this person? I assume the answer to that will probably be no, and it'll be a judge-only trial. Then there's a whole lot of issues that come along with that. The pre-trial bit to these sorts of cases can take months.
Well, that would be interesting if it was a judge-only trial, because for the death penalty, usually it would be up to the jury, not a judge, to determine if the accused should be sentenced to death.
Yeah.
And then that decision has to be unanimous amongst all of the jurors. So that could completely change things if this is a judge-only trial.
There might have to be a decision made by the prosecution. Do they pursue a judge-only trial or try and go for the death penalty with a jury, where they know that the defense, Mangione's team, could argue that there's no way to find a jury that hasn't got a preconceived idea of this man.
Exactly, and that's something that the defense has spoken a lot about, that they don't believe that Mangione will be able to have a fair trial.
And so have we heard anything from Mangione's camp since this announcement, particularly about the death penalty?
Yeah, Mangione's lawyer did put out a statement. They said, by seeking to murder Luigi Mangione, the Justice Department has moved from the dysfunctional to the barbaric. So some pretty strong words there.
Really interesting story, Billi. This is one we're going to be talking about in the news for, dare I say, probably years. So
definitely.
this will take a long time, but it's important to kind of understand how this process is going to evolve, especially in a country with some unique quirks to their judicial system like America. Billi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Daily Aus this morning. We really appreciate your support as always. If you want to tune in to another podcast from us, we'll be back in the afternoon with some headlines. Until then, have a great day.